Hello chess friends and welcome to Out of Chess channel and welcome back to the Computer Rapid Chess Championship in 2021. We're now in the second phase of the super event, which means now that we have only 6 engines that are battling it out for the super final. The best 2 engines will move up to the finals. In my opinion, we'll probably have again the brutal final between Stockfish against Lc0. So the pre-arranged lines in this super event are maybe not the best because one engine has, I think, a decent advantage in an early stage of the game. But that's actually the beauty of the Stockfish engine. The Stockfish engine, when it is playing with the black pieces and maybe white has an advantage of maybe a +1 evaluation, then Stockfish makes at least a draw out of it, which is really cool. Stockfish really defends this position very well, so that's why Stockfish is in the lead with a clear 3-point advantage in front of every other top engine. So when Stockfish is playing maybe a +1 evaluation, pre-arranged +1 evaluation in early stage of the game, then Stockfish destroys simply this pre-arranged lines. But as I said, when Stockfish has to play a bad pre-arranged line, then Stockfish is at least making it wrong. Stockfish is not losing many games. So let's check out now one great game from this second phase of the Computer Rapid Chess Championship. It's a brilliant attack again here by Stockfish against Ra3 in the Pirc Defense, and you see now how creating spaces can be really an important thing in chess. So when you create the spaces, especially a top engine like Stockfish, when it is creating a space advantage in an early stage of the game, then of course the pieces are much freer. The pieces can play much more active in the continuation of the game, and then Stockfish of course finds brilliant and beautiful tactics. Be prepared. This is really a sick and wild game here played by the fish. So let's check out now the game. So d4 here played by Stockfish. We have d6, the Pirc Defense. This was still prearranged, so that's why we're moving up a little bit faster. What I want to still explain about this position after move e5, what you should not do here in this types of ideas is to play d takes e5, then the pawn structure gets symmetrical, and actually black would left of course to play this position because we have now perfect symmetry. Black has a decent position, the knight is out. We'll probably play something like bishop to c5, maybe c6, knight to d7 and similar stuff. Will castle, and black has solved, I think, all of the positional problems. So that's why it's very important here to keep the tension by playing the move c3. d5 in my opinion is also a little bit too rushed because you have already shown your cards. The pawn structure is blocked now. In the meanwhile, I think we can expect a King's Indian game sort of. Black will try g6, bishop to g7. We'll try maybe something like, I don't know, knight to d7. We'll try then f5. So that's why here showing your cards in this types of structure is not a good idea here for white. So that's why the c3 move gives white a certain flexibility. In my opinion, now that's simply one of the best ways here to proceed, because if black wants now to take e takes d4, then c takes d4, and still you will have here a perfect central control. We have now really a dominant position in the center. So that's why here c3 perfect move. So knight to c6, maybe now it would be time to play the move d5 to kick away the knight, but still this prearranged line was knight to f3, bishop to e7, now d5, knight to b8. The engine had to here Lc0 had to bring back the knight on b8 on the starting square. But again, we have now this clarification in the center. We have now this block pawn structure in the center of the board, which means now that the pawn structure is showing us the direction of the attack. So white should now basically control the queen side. White should probably attack the queen side with c4, c5 ideas. On the other hand, black should probably make a progress here with g6, f5 ideas like in the normal King's Indian defense. So here in the continuation of the game, we have now c4, cementing the pawn structure further. We have now castling, knight to c3, knight from b to d7, and now h3. c6 here played by Lc0. This move, knight from b to d7, was the last prearranged line by the organizer. Now c6 here played by Lc0. Very important to move to undermine simply the pressure, because the main advantage that white is here is of course the space advantage, and we want to break it somehow. What white should not do here is to play d takes c6. If you do that, then of course the pawn structure gets split, and okay, you could have maybe here a dominant position on the d file, but the main issue is that you have lost your space advantage that you have built in an early stage of the game here around the square d file. So that's exactly what you should not do here from white's perspective. So that's why here after move c6, Stockfish leaves the position like this, plays simply kingside castling, and we have now c takes d5, we have now c takes d5, and now knight to c5, attacking also the pawn but also the bishop on d3. e3. Here we have bishop to c2 and now a5. a5, very important move. You've seen many times these structures in which we're not allowing here this knight to be kicked away with the move b4, so that's why a5 so far a cementing move. But when we watch now the pawn structure further, it's also a move that weakens the pawn structure on the queen side. We have said that white has still a dominant position on the queen side because white has the space advantage still on the queen side. The pawn is on the queen side, the d pawn, so that's why again white will probably attack the queen side, so that's why a5 is okay, is cementing your knight on c5 further, so the knight is staying there at least for a while. But there are now several weaknesses that can be attacked, for instance this b6 weakness and also the weak square b5. So here in the continuation we have bishop to e3, queen to c7, and now knight to b5. You see the queen has really problems where it should be developed, so with the move knight to b5 we get another tempo against the queen, queen to b6, and now a4, cementing also the knight. And we have now bishop to d7, queen to e2. We have a rook from f to c8. It's very important to play with this f rook instead of this a rook, because here if you play, for instance, I don't know, a rook from a to c8, in one particular moment we can expect this queen to be challenged by the move knight to d2 and then knight to c4. When that happens, then if you move the queen to d8 again, then you don't have any more the rook connection. Now after move rook from f to c8, now after move knight to d2 and then knight to c4, when we move the queen to d8, still the rooks are connected. So that sort of maneuver that you should consider when you're playing chess, which the rook connection is one of the most important stages of the opening. So that's why you should always watch out what kind of a position we can reach by still having our rook connection. So that's why rook from f to c8, of course, more accurate than rook from a to c8. So here knight to d2, as promised, knight to c4 is falling, the queen gets more and more endangered. We have now h6, and here a rook to a3, knight to e8, and now comes this idea knight to c4. Here if you take maybe earlier the move the knight with the move knight to b5, it's not so good, because of course we don't want to take with the queen here. It's more important now to take with the pawn. The pawn structure gets asymmetrical again, which is now really good for the bishop pair, and now we have at least a clear target where we should attack. It's now simply the weak pawn on a5. Now in the continuation we can expect, of course, a rook battery on the a file. Even b4 can be then a great breakthrough. So here I think white will have a dominant game. So that's why you would love to get rid of this very annoying knight on b5, but so far it's not a great possibility here for black. So that's why after move rook to a3, we have knight to e8 and now knight to c4. And as I said, queen to d8, the queen gets kicked away, but at least now the rooks are still connected. There's nothing standing in between these two rooks. So far a decent setup also for black, but you see now the problems of space in chess. Now Stockfish realized, okay, I have paralyzed everything on the queen side, I have really a dominant position on the queen side, but it's nothing that can be done so much on the queen side. Now Stockfish realizes because the rooks have moved too much to the queen side, Stockfish is aiming now a new square in the position. Now Stockfish aims simply this weak square f7, and here in the continuations now Stockfish gets his pieces a little bit back. Knight to c3, queen to c7, king to h2, improves simply the position a little bit further of these pieces. We have now knight to d2, b6, and now f4. First opening, of course, the f file, because as we said, the pieces are simply too far away from the action. We have now bishop to f6, rook to f3, we have rook to b7, king to h1, e takes f4, bishop to f4. We have now bishop to e5. The problem is now if you play two passive moves, if you play something like rook to b8, then you get this one, rook to a1, maybe queen to d8, and you see now white will create this very annoying rook battery on the f file. Now in the continuation of the game we can expect even some tactics, maybe bishop to h6 after g takes h6, maybe rook takes f6 would be an opportunity. Not immediately, because black still has a great protection of this, but it's really wild. I think by creating a rook battery, white could have a pleasant game here. I think even then queen to f2 could be maybe an opportunity, then this idea bishop to h6 and similar stuff. So as I said, this is something that you should consider. The bishop is a little bit stuck on f6 in this position. The f7 is still a long-term weakness. So here in the continuation of the game, as we said, bishop to f4, here bishop to to f5, bishop to e5 played by Lila-c0. Lila tries to simplify the game by trading off this bishops off the board. We have now bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and we have now a new structure which becomes, I think, a favorable endgame structure for white. White has now this supported pass pawn. If this game reaches now the endgame stage, it could be simply a winning game for white, because this supported pass pawn is really hard to block. So that's why one of the best ways how to beat the supported pass pawn is to create a blockade. At least Lila-c0 probably calculated that it can maybe play this very nice blockade idea around the square d6 by putting the knight. One of the best pieces that can block out the position is the knight, because when the knight comes on d6, still it controls very well the center of the board. So that's why when we watch now the position, nothing went wrong so far for Lila-c0, but you see now the attacking brilliancy of Stockfish. Stockfish really brutalizes now the position, plays rook to g3, very annoying move, because the rook becomes now the main attacker. The rook comes now on the same file where already the king is. We have queen to d8, knight to c4, queen to f6, now rook to a1, knight to d6, and now rook to f1. You see the queen gets kicked away, and here after move queen to e7, the really fun starts, because queen to h5, Stockfish sacrifices now the knight on c4. That's exactly what Lila-c0 did. Knight takes c4, but now queen to h6. You cannot of course take because of this rook activity on the g file, so that's why here you have to play queen to f8. If you play something like g6, maybe to release the pressure a little bit on the g file, it's not so good, because then you get d6, you have to move the queen somewhere, and then knight to d5 will come, and then knight to f6 is simply winning the game. So this move d6, knight to d5, you should always now consider in the continuation of our analysis, because it's the main attacking motif now that Stockfish is hoping for. As I said, d6, knight to d5, and even knight to f6 then is an opportunity. So it's, as I said, the main attacking motif that Stockfish will try out in the continuation of the game, and pretty much everything is glued together here for white. Black needs now really to play such great defensive moves in order to defend this position. Somehow the activity of this heavy artillery by the rook, by the queen, are simply too much to handle already for black here. Queen to f8, now we see rook to f6. Look at these moves that Stockfish is playing. Rook to f6, really sick move, because Stockfish is not allowing here some knight to d6 retreating moves. What Lila-c0 realized here is that Lila-c0 has to bring all of these pieces out of the 6th rank. So that's why Lila played really maybe a dubious move, which seems in the beginning like a bad move, b5, but at least here it makes something to react. White needs now to react. White played now the move b3, and here after move rook to b6, what you should not do here from White's perspective, that was part of Lila-c0's plan, is to play rook to b6, because okay, you have your piece back, knight to b6, but now after queen to b6 you get b4, and b4 would actually solve now all of the positional problems for black. Black has defended the position, black has now maybe even slightly better position, because now the knight gets kicked away. There is this great tension on the c file. The bishop is very active on both of these diagonals, so it will be a good position here for white, for black. So here, even if you play something like b takes c4, if you take out the knight immediately, again it's not so good, because you get rook to f6, queen to f6, and now b4 again. This is now the main defensive move, simply kicking away the knight from the defense of the e4. Now you have to play something like knight to e2, and now with g6 everything is pretty much good here for black. So that's why after move rook to b6, now Stockfish found again this brilliant motif d6, d6, d6. That's the main attacking beautiful move. Here after move rook to d6, we have now a knight to d5. Again, if you take, then you get simply here, if you take rook to f6, then you get a knight to f6, a beautiful checkmate. So that's why after move knight to d5, here we have rook to e6, but now after b takes c4, we have now b4, rook takes e6, f takes e6, and now again this motif knight to f6, we have king to f7. You cannot of course take here. If you take queen to f6, then queen to f6, and it's a checkmate in 2. So here after move knight to f6, we have king to f7, queen to h4, we have g takes f6, and now queen to h7. Here after move king to e8, you see the queen gets trapped. Really beautiful attack by the fish. After move rook to g8, we have queen to g8, queen takes g8, king to e7, and now a couple more checks. But now h4, this is now a brilliant tactic. Here's the stockfish create annoying pass pawn. Here after move h4, we have b3, bishop to b1, we have bishop to c6, h5, knight to e4, here queen to g6, attacking the knight, and here king to c5. Here Lila-c0 calculated probably that it would be enough to even sacrifice some material, but creating maybe this annoying pass pawn with the support with the rook and the king. So now with maybe by playing rook to b8, then king to b5, b4, then king to a3, maybe this is playable for black. But here Stockfish accepts the challenge, play simply bishop to e4, bishop takes e4, queen to e4. Now the rook gets behind this pawn. Very decent play here by Lila-c0, but Stockfish plays now queen to h7, a counter attack with ideas to play, of course, queen to c7, a double attack against the king and the rook. So that's why here king to b4 had to be played, and now queen to b1, we have king to c4, a couple of checks by Lila-c0, and now finally h6, king to b4, we have queen to c1, king to a4, now again a new check, we have a new check, and now simply pushing the pawn further, we have h7, b2, here queen to h8, a new promotion, we have now a new queen on the board. But now after move b1, we have now 3 queens on the board. But now after move king to h2, the problem is that Lila-c0 doesn't have good checks here. That's the main issue. The queens are dancing now all over the board, so it's now already a +4 evaluation here for white. So queen to f5, we have queen to h6, we have queen to f4, we have here a couple of trades of queens, queen to e6, a4, queen to f6, and now after king to b3, a couple of more checks. Here after queen to f5, we have king to b2, and now a new check. You have to protect your rook. We here with the move king to c3, and now queen to b1. Very important to stop, of course, the progress of this pawn. This is an annoying pawn. You should handle it by playing like this. You have always the opportunity to play some perpetuals. What you want to do is, of course, somehow take out this pawn. Then if you take out the pawn on f4, then you would have a supported pass pawn on the g file. So here in the continuation, we have a3, queen to a2, we have king to b4, and now g4. And okay, here in the continuation, Lila-c0 played king to rook to c5. Probably f takes g3 would be more accurate. It seems so that this is a draw, but actually it's a great calculation here by Stockfish, because after h takes g3, king takes g3, still you can move up your king here towards the center of the board. That's the most important thing now, to include your king into the game, because if you start to push in one particular moment, the problem is now you get always this kind of a tactic in which we play the zigzag checks, and now you risk this one. If that happens, then you lose, of course, the rook. So it's not easy now for black to defend everything. It's not so easy for black to glue these pieces together, to glue this king with this rook together, to glue this king and rook to this pawn together. So the queen will get its activity with the support of the king. So although, as I said, the engine, for instance, at home, my engine at home suggests this move, f takes g3, still it's a much better position here for white. So in the continuation, we have rook to c5. Lila-c0 didn't take the pawn here on g3. Here in the continuation, we have now queen to b1, king to a4, and now Stockfish moves up here the king towards center, and finally pushes also this pass pawn on gg file. We have rook to c3, we have g6, rook to c6, now simply pushing the pawn further, and I'm not sure why Lila-c0 really played this endgame like this. Allowed here Stockfish to promote to a new queen. We have rook to d2, a couple of checks, no problem here, and now queen to b7. We have here king to c5, and here after move queen to d5. It was a beautiful checkmate. So okay, brilliant game by Stockfish. Really wild stuff. You have seen this is not so easy to play. You have a space advantage in the center of the board, but doing something out of this is a whole different story. You see how Stockfish changed the direction of the attack. First, Stockfish paralyzed the whole queen side, get a huge activity on the queen side. When Lc0 maneuvered all of the pieces towards the queen side, then suddenly Stockfish changed the directions, maneuvered the pieces to the king side, and Lc0 was a little bit too slow. Stockfish struck back with some brilliant tactics on the f-file. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more brutal attacks like this, check out my Commented Chess Games Play by Computer series with some great games played by Stockfish, AlphaZero, Lila0, and many more. And if you want to see humans battling it out in their best chess games, check out my Best Chess Games of All Time series with some great games from the past. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.